Curtains have gone up for this year's Consumer Electronics Show over in Las Vegas, where big-name companies and their smaller counterparts have on display their innovative takes to ensure a better life in the foreseeable future. On Press Perspective today, we touch upon this trade show against the backdrop of tariff threats and other economic headwinds for South Korea. Do stay with us. Hello, you're watching Press Perspective for this Wednesday, January 8th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we start with the latest from this year's Consumer Electronics Show in the US before moving to broader economic matters for South Korea. For more on this, I have Lee Ji-hoon with international news agency Reuters here in the studio. Ji-hoon, it's great to have you back and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I also have Professor Yang Jun-sok at the Catholic University of Korea with us. Professor Yang, as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Happy to be here and Happy New Year.
Right, Professor, Happy New Year. We'll start here in the studio, Ji-hoon. This year's Consumer Electronics Show is underway in Las Vegas as we speak. What more can you tell us about the event, including, of course, the interest that Korean companies have been generating among the foreign media?
Yep. Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, is an annual event where major companies from around the world gather in Las Vegas for a week to showcase their newest technologies. This year, however, the event is being held just 2 weeks prior to the next U.S. administration, which is bringing up an unusual issue of tariff at the technology event. As you know, Trump has pledged to impose tariffs on imports from major trading partners such as Canada, Mexico, and China. And he has also floated the idea of introducing a blanket tariff of 10 to 20% on all imports shipped to the United States. Because of that, tariff is being discussed a lot at CES this year, according to our reports, and other policy-related issues like subsidies and supply chain are also being brought up by major tech and auto companies. One example is Japan's Honda, which said that the policy uncertainty is making it cautious about electric vehicle production, and it will be cautious about manufacturing batteries in Canada. Other than that, analysts say interest is high in technologies related to artificial intelligence, of course, which has been a major driver of global stock markets in recent years, including South Korea. Earlier this week, NVIDIA shares in the United States hit a record high, and in South Korea, chip makers like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, they also rose sharply on hopes around new AI technologies. One of major events at CES this year was NVIDIA CEO's keynote speech on Monday, where he talked about artificial intelligence technologies for training robots and self-driving cars. He unveiled what he called Cosmos Foundation models, which is generating video for AI training for cars and robots, and new gaming chips as well, which are expected to help with NVIDIA's sales in the short term. And stock market is showing immediate reaction to NVIDIA's comments. In the United States, Micron Technology shares rose nearly 3% overnight because NVIDIA said Micron was providing memory chips for NVIDIA's gaming chipsets. And in South Korea, Samsung Electronics shares, they also rose more than 3% today because NVIDIA said Samsung was close to passing NVIDIA's quality tests. When it comes to South Korean companies, a record high of more than 900 companies are participating in this year's CES events, including major conglomerates like Samsung, Hyundai, LG and SK, according to the industry ministry.
Right. Professor Yang, as Jun has just mentioned, a record number of Korean companies are indeed taking part in the CES of 2025. That being said, what measures, Professor Yang, do you propose for the government and local businesses in the global IT market as we prepare for greater tariffs amid the return of the Trump administration, as Jun mentioned earlier on?
Okay, well, let's start with the tariffs first. President Trump has threatened that he would impose 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports to the United States and 60% on imports from China. Now, higher tariffs will affect Korean exports, if nothing else, because the prices for U.S. consumers will go up. So it will have a negative shock for Korean exports, including exports of electronics. But perhaps it will not be as bad as some analysts fear right now, because all the countries are getting hit with the same tariffs. And for China, which is in some ways Korea's biggest competitors in electronics, they will be getting hit with higher tariffs. So it will not be a good event for Korea, but its negative effect may be hopefully less than feared. But ideally, we shouldn't have increased tariffs in the first place. So I think that's where the government and the Korean companies should aim at. Try to form partnerships with U.S. retailers, U.S. companies which use Korean intermediate parts, and U.S. consumers to show the Trump administration that the tariffs will not be good for not be good for the U.S. consumers. It will not be good for U.S. companies. It will add to U.S. inflation. So basically, that's what the government can do for the moment. And the private companies who also invest in the United States, who export to the United States, can form partnerships with the Korean government and the U.S. retailers, U.S. consumers as well, to try to get this point across. And then what the companies can do, well, they can continually innovate, try to come up with items that consumers want. And Samsung, as well as other Korean electronics companies like LG, they've been very good at innovating new consumer products that people like. But sometimes the government, because of heavy regulations or restrictions, cannot really support them in developing these new products. So Korean government should emphasize deregulation, regulatory reform, so that the Korean companies can get these innovative products to the market as quickly as possible.
Right, quite a number of innovative products are being shared by Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics at the Consumer Electronics Show ongoing in Las Vegas as we speak. Ji-hoon, beyond that though, what would you say here on the domestic front has been perhaps the impact of the arrest warrant issued for President Yoon Suk-yeol on the country's foreign exchange as well as stock markets?
Yeah, last year, South Korea's won currency weakened near 13% against the dollar, which was the biggest annual drop since 2008. And it was also the biggest drop among major Asian currencies. In December, the dollar-won rate hit its highest level in more than 15 years, rising over 1480, as political uncertainty heightened after the president's impeachment following his martial law attempt. This week, the dollar-won rate is trading a little bit lower at around 1450. But finance minister today said it was still too early to be relieved. And many analysts are saying there is a possibility of the dollar-won rate rising above 1500 sometime this year because of political uncertainty remaining high with the ongoing impeachment process and arrest attempts undermining global credibility in South Korea's economy and financial markets. In the stock market, the Kospi fell nearly 10% last year, which was also the worst among Asian peers, compared with Japan's near 20% gain, Taiwan's near 30% gain, and China's more than 10% gains. Analysts are saying recent political uncertainty proves Korea discount, which is a term often used to refer to the Kospi is undervaluation, and that it is adding to downward pressure on the stock market. In response to all of this, top financial officials from the finance ministry, central bank, and regulatory agencies, they are holding meetings every week to assess market conditions and review countermeasures. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, who is now serving as acting president, said he will continue to hold the so-called F4 meeting every week until financial markets stabilize, even as the acting president.
Right, indeed. Professor Yang, what has been the impact of government efforts to stabilize the foreign exchange market on Korea's foreign exchange reserves?
Okay, well, Korea's foreign exchange reserves at the end of December last year was 415.6 billion US dollars. A lot of people, including myself, have been worried that continually depreciating Korean won, and especially during December when we had quite rapid changes in a very limited period of time. We had 2 or 3 days when won changed more than 8 won per day. It involved a lot of intervention by the Bank of Korea. So we were concerned that perhaps the foreign exchange reserves fell down by a lot. But the December figures show that it actually went up slightly. It went up by 210 million US dollars. And reportedly, the Bank of Korea spent less on defending the Korean won than it expected. So in turn, that is good news. Korean foreign exchange reserves is reportedly still the ninth largest in the world, and it's generally considered a very healthy amount. It's deemed generally sufficient for maintaining Korea's economic stability. But because Korean won had been depreciating so much in the last year, that if you look at the long-term trend, the foreign reserves are declining. It's been shrinking since 2019, and if you look at just the last year, then we had a high of last year in September with 420 billion US dollars, and it shrunk about $4.5 billion since September, and that probably has been used for defending the Korean won from depreciating further. And some of the analysts are concerned that the reason that the Korean foreign reserves have not been falling that much is that Korea has been doing a lot to increase the US dollar holdings, especially by Korean financial institutions. The Bank of Korea, as well as the government, has loosened up some of the foreign exchange related regulations, such as regulations on holding currency futures and regulations on deposits by domestic Korean agencies, dollar deposits. So if you look at the subcategories, while the securities holdings of Bank of Korea has fallen, the deposits made by domestic financial institutions that are held by Bank of Korea went up, and that's where the increase in the foreign reserves came from. So generally, we're in a safe place, but some of it may be due to these recent changes in regulation, deregulation, and regulatory loosening. And some of the reasons why the regulations were placed in the first place was that we didn't want the foreign US dollar holdings to be short-term oriented. And so this type of loosening of regulation is appropriate right now, but once this current urgent situation reduces a bit, perhaps we should be looking at re-regulating some of these regulations that have been loosened up in the last couple of months.
I see. So a shift in policy following that then. Ji-hoon, staying with government efforts to stabilize the broader economy, I believe a policy to spur foreign inflows has been shared. Could you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. When the government announced biennial economic plans last week, its main focus was on stabilizing financial markets, especially the foreign exchange market. For example, the finance minister said it will widen the role of foreign banks in the foreign exchange market by allowing different kinds of foreign exchange transactions for them. such as settlements of export and import transactions. The ministry says they will boost liquidity in the foreign exchange market as foreign banks were previously allowed to conduct transactions only for financial investment purposes, such as bond and stock trading. The ministry also said it will allow South Korean companies to borrow money overseas and bring the money back home to spend on facility investment, which is a big change for South Korea because it used to be controlling overseas debt very strictly due to trauma from capital flight during the past financial crisis. The ministry says it was possible because South Korea turned a net creditor in 2014, and now it holds foreign exchange reserves of the 9th largest amount in the world, which is allowing room for policymakers to loosen restrictions, as Professor Yang said. The government also announced various measures related to financial markets, such as expanding foreign exchange swap program between the central bank and the pension fund, and making it easier for foreigners to access the local bond market. All of these measures are aimed at boosting liquidity in the foreign exchange market and make it more stable, with more demand to exchange the dollars for the won, which should help the dollar-won rate stabilize in the long run.
Right, hopefully fingers crossed then. Speaking within your capacity as a scholar, Professor Yang, what more can you tell us with regard to the practicality of this proposed policy by the government?
Okay, I think the policies that were mentioned can fall into two categories. One is to increase dollar holdings at the current time. And as I mentioned in the last question, perhaps some of those measures should be temporary. We do feel it is desirable right now, but in the long term, it may increase volatility in the currency market. So those should be considered very carefully. Another set of measures that was promised to WGIB, the World Government Bond Index, when Korea tried to join the WGEI index. Korea did join, but they did delay the implementation because the WGBI was waiting for some of these measures to go through. Some of the measures considered here include measures to make the trading hours for government bonds for foreign investors longer. It also includes measures like allowing registered foreign financial institutions to engage in current transactions like settlements of exports and imports, and which would increase competition in the domestic financial market. So these are desirable and they should certainly go ahead. But the question is, are these measures enough to bring in investment in the short term? And I have a bit of doubt about that. The investments come in because it is profitable for the investors. And right now, because there's so many bad news, so much political turmoil, that I'm not sure if the domestic Korean investments are desirable enough to foreign investors. But these measures will definitely help in the medium to long run. I'm just not sure whether, given all the situation that we have, including the especially political turmoil, that it's enough to attract that much short-term capital right now.
Right, I see. Professor Yang, what is your outlook with regard to consumer prices here in South Korea then in the new year?
Okay, well, consumer prices for December 2024, if you look at it in 12-month range, the headline inflation came up to 1.9, which is very close to Bank of Korea's goal. And the coal inflation, again, over 12 months was 1.8%, again, very close to Bank of Korea's goal. And it's been generally on a declining trend. So we can say that perhaps the inflation has stabilized. If you look at the monthly numbers, well, the headline inflation was fairly high over just month of December, 0.4%, but that was due to temporary rise in oil prices and vegetable prices. So that should not be too serious for macroeconomics. The core inflation, which strips away the food prices and oil prices, energy prices, that only came up to 0.1, which is stable enough. But what is a bit concerning is if you look at the prices for manufactured goods, it only went up by 1.4% in December. It only went up by 0.6% in the month of November, and that's substantially below the goals set by the Bank of Korea. It may show that the economy is slowing down, especially for the manufacturing sector. So that is concerning. It could signal that Korea is already in a fairly serious slowdown, but we'll have to look at the January numbers to make sure.
Right, I see. So we'll have to wait for the numbers this month to see for sure whether our economy is slowing down then. Ji-hoon, aside from tariffs, we talked about that earlier, what other issues look to dominate the economic agenda of 2025?
Domestically, the main focus will be on economic sentiment for both consumers and businesses as they weakened sharply after the martial law attempt last month. The consumer sentiment is at the lowest since late 2022 when it was hit by the Itaewon crowd crush. And the business sentiment is at the lowest since since 2020 when it was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Last week, the government said we prepare measures to boost consumer demand with tax cuts for household spending and car purchases. While it also promised support measures for small and medium-sized firms with tax cuts for facility investment. And another domestic issue is supplementary government budget, as the parliament last month cut the government's budget spending for this year from the government's proposal. That is raising expectations among economists that the government will draft an extra budget as early as in the first quarter to boost domestic demand. The government says it is not planning on drafting an extra budget for now, but there are growing calls especially among lawmakers that the government should prepare it as soon as possible. So we'll have to see how it develops.
Right, and speaking about waiting to see, what are some economy-related issues to keep an eye on this month?
Next week, the Bank of Korea will hold its first monetary policy meeting for this year. After lowering interest rates for two consecutive meetings last year from 3.5% to 3%. The Bank of Korea governor said earlier this month that the central bank will lower interest rates more this year, but that it will be flexible due to a trade-off among policy variables such as growth, inflation, and financial stability. Many analysts also say the Bank of Korea is in a tough situation because when it comes to economic growth, there is growing downward pressure, but then the BOK will also have to be cautious about high dollar-won exchange rate because they could reignite inflation pressure through input prices. So next week, we'll have to see how the Bank of Korea balances between these two conflicting variables of slowing growth and high exchange rate.
Right, for sure. So we'll wait for next week to see if it gives us a better idea of where the economy is headed. All right, Ji-hoon, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
And Professor Yang, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all for this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching.